This is our Legacy Farmers panel. We debated for a while what we were going to call the leaders of our area's food system in the last 20 years. Do we call them legacy farmers? Do we call them pioneers? I think overall they're just legendaries. They're the rock stars. They're all sitting there shaking their heads. No, not me. Anyway, these four farmers have contributed immensely to the development and growth of our food systems, the whole community of small farms, organic agriculture, sustainable agriculture over the last 20 years. And I'm so proud to have them here with me today. Before I introduce each one of them and get into the questions, I just think acknowledging and thanking the farmers that have worked with us for the last 20 years is really important. These four are just a few. There's a lot of people who aren't here, and there are some other people that are here that I'd like to recognize. And Colette, if there's somebody I forget that, yeah, they helped us a lot, just stand up and say their name. So I'd like to thank and acknowledge Stan Ehrman of Riley Creek Blueberries, Tony Carey of Four Season Farms, Barbara Arnold, the late Barbara Arnold, makes me choke up, from Nothing But Herbs, Melissa Lines from Skylines Farm, Russell Poe and Kelly Kingsland from Affinity Farms. They're over here, they're shy. Jen Elliott from Palouse Prairie Farm. Tom and Jen's here. Tom and Cheryl Camerzell from Maple Cay Farm. Eric and Cheryl Zachariason from Zachariason Partnership. Marcy Miller and Greg Freestad from Deep Roots. They are here. Carrie Wilson and her whole family from Wilson Banner Ranch. Craig Matson from Healing Hooves. Steve Streets is here. And Steve, somewhere, he may not be a farmer per se, but he has mentored and had a lot of farmers on his land farming for our community food system. So I think he gets to be part of the thank you. Many farmers in southern Idaho. I'm just now focusing on this farmers area. Brad Jekyll is here today, who runs the WSU Organic Farm. And I think there's many more. That's what came to my mind when I was deciding to say the list. But they have helped us do classes, do field tours, just ask questions at the drop of a hat, you know. And it's really been helpful, and I can't thank you enough. So let's go on and introduce the farmers we have here. I'm going to start with Ellen on the far end. That's why I put their names so you could see which one's which. You do have their bios in the packet. I am not going to read their bios today. In extension, to be accountable for our work, we have to measure impacts. What is your impact on the local food system or small farmers? How many people have you taught? What have they learned? I mean, you know, that's why we do these evaluations all the time. And, you know, we can do that and we can take credit for everything, but we are not responsible. It takes a lot of different things going into the mix of farmers, educators, everything to keep moving, and society change to keep the food system moving. But these farmers have particularly helped us, and they have made impacts in their local and our regional food system that I think warrants mentioning. So Ellen began teaching workshops in the mid-90s, I'm going to guess. Some of these things I made up, but I'd say it's in the mid-90s. alongside Vicki Parker Clark, who was our Kootenai County Extension educator at the time. And she had developed a program called Becoming a Market Gardener. And, let me stop and say Ellen's from Killarney Farm. Sorry, I kind of jumped ahead. Ellen is farms east of Coeur d'Alene, near Rose Lake, Cataldo, in that area. She sells at the farmers market in Coeur d'Alene, Kootenai Farmers Market and the downtown market, and many other wholesale venues and on and on. But her and her partner, Paul, have been there for over 25 years. And so then I wanted to talk about some of the impacts. So she started this course on, obviously, Vicki started this course on becoming a market gardener and brought in local farmers to teach sessions. Remember I told you before how things have changed since 20 years ago? 20 years ago, we didn't have any knowledge to impart, as extension educators, to impart to wannabe farmers. We brought in the expert farmers who had some knowledge to share with their other farmers. We still do that because farmers want to learn from other farmers. Anyway, so back to Ellen. This Market Gardener course was the precursor of what is now our Sustainable Small Farming and Ranching intro course that's part of the overall Cultivating Success program. I don't know if Ellen even knew that, but that's what we took, is we took that, Vicki's curriculum, and kind of expanded it. And so that's amazing. And you know, Ellen went on to help us with Cultivating Success. She's done a lot of workshops for us and taught in a lot of classes. And I remember I think it was 2006, I invited Ellen. Oh, Ellen lived, I don't know about now, but she used to live off the grid. So about 2006, I asked her to do a video conference. She remembers it. So we're the only two in the room in Coeur d'Alene, and we're broadcasting, now this was before webinars, this is video conferencing, to Diane in Sandpoint, and I think we were down to Moscow and Boise, I think. And so we're sitting in a room and she's talking to nobody, and very different way of instructing, and she did really good. And so it all worked, and she's, over the last 25 years, she didn't give me a number, but she's mentored numerous interns on her farm. 1 or 2 a year, Ellen?
At least 2.
Yeah, at least 2 a year, so that's 50. That's a lot of people that she's, yeah. I got that here. Kelly's like pointing at Russell. I do have that here. In fact, she mentored one of Moscow's premier farmers, Russell Poe from Affinity Farm. He's over there ducking down. She was very integral to the whole Coeur d'Alene food system because she has been on their farmers market as the president of their board for 20 years. Now that's a lot of influence and direction. And so I just want to say to you, Ellen, thank you for all your impacts, for all the work that you've done beyond just growing crops. It's immensely helpful. You got to take it in because it's true. Maurice, Robinette, on this end. Lazy R Ranch out of Cheney, Washington. He's a third-generation cow-calf operator for over 38 years. I first met Maurice, I think, when you were participating in a 5-year Kellogg-funded holistic management project through WSU. 5-year program. That's a long training program. He was one of the early adopters of holistic management and became certified as a holistic management instructor and also a certified consensus facilitator. He went on and besides his time outside raising cattle on his ranch, he spent, and I should say, implementing the principles of holistic management on his own ranch. He spent a lot of time educating others, doing workshops on farm profitability, grazing management using the holistic management practices. And I don't have any numbers, but it's significant. Thank you. He's currently part of a Washington-based group, Roots of Resilience, with many of the same holistic management certified ranchers, educators that they started with. Isn't that right? They offer a wide variety of workshops, and coincidentally, they have a workshop coming up later this month in Pendleton. I hope you brought some flyers or something. Probably not, but you can talk to him later and get some information. It's called the Resilience for Land and Livestock Conference. I know one of the speakers is Temple Grandin, and you can ask him more details later. Maurice is a testament to sustainability in agriculture. We've actually got some long-standing proof. And this is probably one of his most meaningful impacts, although I've never really asked him. He raised an incredibly smart, hardworking cowgirl daughter, Beth Robinette. Where is she? Oh, she's dying.
There's two, by the way. I have a sister. Yes, that's right.
Okay. Your sister's great too, sorry. What's her name?
Jacqueline.
Jacqueline and Beth. I don't know Jacqueline, but Beth is out there rocking the Spokane food system. You'll find more about Beth later because she's going to be our capstone speaker. And you'll get why I say, that's a proof of sustainability. Okay, Lora Lee. And by the way, Jen, I'm way past the time. Lora Lee, but this is important to tell you these things, has been farming with her husband Rick at Quillisascut Farm in Rice, Washington for over 36 years. They raise goats and she makes cheese. They have a huge kitchen garden, and I'm sure there's other things that I didn't have here, but I've been there, and so I do know that the kitchen garden is a huge part of what they do. In 2002, they started the Quillisascut Farm School of Domestic Arts. Isn't that a cool name? Maybe you ought to go check that out online. Since then, over 1,000 chefs, culinary students, food service workers, and educators and consumers have participated in one of her week-long culinary classes to experience the connections between farm to table. So she's reaching a whole different audience there, and a really important audience. They've also been involved in Cultivating Success since about 2006. And they have developed a unique one-week-long intro to sustainable small farming and ranching that over 100 beginning farmers have attended. So they go and spend a week there and get an intense course rather than doing it over a longer period of time. Lora Lee has co-authored 2 books, Rethinking the Kitchen, The Sustainable Kitchen Handbook, and she wrote another one, Chefs on the Farm, Recipes and Inspirations from the Quillisascut Farm School of the Domestic Arts.
Amazing.
Awesome. Thank you. And thank you, Maurice. I forgot to thank you specifically, eye to eye. I've got one more. And Diane, I have to really trim down what I say for you because it would take me the next hour. Diane Greene and her husband, Tom, own Greentree Naturals in Sandpoint, Idaho, outside of Sandpoint. They've been farming there for 29 years. They've mentored over 50 interns since 1998. And I do have numbers for Diane. She keeps track of things, if you know Diane. Record keeping, she's got it down. She's taught over 200 students through on-farm organic workshops for over 20 years. She's taught many workshops for Rural Roots and Cultivating Success and on, all over the state on marketing, starting farmers markets, vegetable production, organic vegetable production, on and on. She's instructor for many of our sustainable ag courses and webinars, and she developed and has taught the Farmer Mentor Program to hundreds of students. She's been the keynote at conferences all over the country, from South Carolina to Portland and all around places in the western U.S. She's written 2 books. She wrote the Farmer Mentor Handbook and training that we use in our Cultivating Success, and she's also written Selling Produce to Restaurants. And so many of you might have copies of that. And it's in its 3rd production, I think. She's had to get it printed several times, reprinted. So thank you, Diane. Now you can give these farmers a hand. Okay, I know that took a long time, but I wanted you to know who you're hearing from here and why they can answer some of the questions I'm going to pose to them. The first question, and I'll start with you, Maurice. You can stay there and have the mic there. What changes have you seen in small-scale, sustainable, organic farming or ranching in our regional food systems over the last 20 years? And I'd kind of like you to focus on livestock, because the other, well, I guess Laura Lee does goats, but you know what I mean.
Sure. You hear me okay? Yeah. Probably the most exciting stuff is right now. The ideas of regenerative ag are getting more mainstream. There's a really good program going on with WSU in Douglas County, and grazing cover crops, and then putting a cereal crop in after the meat crop is taken off. And that's getting more and more attention. This whole idea of grazing in conjunction with cereal production is really starting to explode right now. So I'd say that's probably what's happening right now are the biggest changes that I've seen in 20 years.
All right. Why don't you pass that down to Laura Lee? How about the same question? What have you seen in your last 20 years?
Well, the main thing that we've produced on our farm has been goat cheese, Farmstead goat cheese. And so I think the artisan cheese movement has just really exploded. When we started out licensed in 1987, there were 3 small-scale producers in Washington State, and now, I don't know, there's probably more than 100. So, and here in Idaho, I think the same thing. And the quality of the cheese has really been incredible. And larger styles of cheese, people really, I think the consumer on the eater side, people are a lot more sophisticated in asking and trying maybe some cheeses that are a little bit would have been hard to approach in 1987 when we started, when people really liked commodity cheese, and they say, oh, I really like this cheese that we get free from the government. Why should we buy your cheese? And it's like, what? That was a hard question then, but now that's why we really went to chefs, because they didn't ask that question. They had wanted to use local products, and so I think that still, like, the local food movement is really growing, and the ability to sell that cheese at farmers markets. When we first started out, it's like people were just like, cheese. Like, what is cheese, and why is cheese at a farmer's market? Goat cheese? It's like, do you drink goat milk? I mean, we had, so I think that people don't ask those kinds of questions anymore. They're just excited to see it. So
speaks for it. I want to follow up with that, because I know that you marketed into Seattle restaurants and everything. So now that it's gone from 3 to 100 people producing cheese, is that affected your market, or have you been able to keep the people that were your original buyers?
Well, we've changed our market, because one of our goals with starting the Quillisascut Farm School of Domestic Arts was to be able to have, some different incomes coming into the farm, and maybe be able to decrease the size of our herd. And we were just looking at, we have non-irrigated pasture, and how the impact of the livestock, even the quantity. We had a small flock. I mean, maybe we had about 65 goats total, milking 40, and looking at. Used to be they talked about drought cycles. They never say that anymore, but it just seems like it keeps getting drier and drier. So with climate change, maybe we need to change our farm model. So we were looking at ways of bringing in another component to our farm. I lost the question.
Well, you just answered the second question, which is what notable changes have you made in your operation?
Yeah.
And so that's totally perfect to answer that. That's fine.
Okay.
So you've focused in on what you might do different?
I think that I think the great thing about small scale farming is it can ever be evolving. So you can dream up something and you can try it and see if it works. And I think that education as growers, we're all educating people about what we're doing. Even if we're selling wholesale, you're going to have to educate somebody about what you're doing. So even broadening that to educate the end user, even if we don't see that direct contact, I think that that's really important. But I wanted to get my little thing in. So this afternoon I'm doing a thing on lost art of cottage cheese. So that's the cheese that my mom made that made me really want to start making cheese on my own farm. I love it. And I'm working on a year-long project with that. And so I'm going to be talking a little bit about that. It's really a lost art. The cheese that everybody that had a cow or a goat knew how to make this on their farm. And we've really lost that as we've lost generations of people that made it and ate it and loved it. But people love it. People love cottage cheese. I'm so amazed.
Yeah, and I think several people in here are anxious to go to that session later. Each of these farmers will be doing a session later, and we'll remind you of that. Why don't you hand it down to Diane, and maybe we'll talk about both 1 and 2. Like, what changes have you seen overall in the food system? And if you have a specific change that you've made on your farm that kind of goes right with that.
Sure. Well, when we first approached our first restaurant in 1995, they had never, ever considered working with a farmer before. And so that was a brand new concept. And we were fortunate enough to have a chef that was willing to work with us, and we discovered a million ways not to do it. Like, I think the first time I went in with a catalog and asked, what would you like us to grow? And he, of course, picked everything that we couldn't grow. Hence the reason I ended up writing the Selling the Produce to Restaurants, because I just took notes as I went through the process and learned a lot along the way. And as we went through our process of adding more restaurants within 3 years, and typical in the restaurant business, restaurants tend to go out of business, and that kind of moved us into thinking about diversifying how we marketed what we were doing, which we started at farmers market, and then went to restaurants, and then started CSAs, and then started a farm stand, and now do wholesale and have shifted through that. I think as far as changes on the farm over the years, when I think of when we first started, the concept of what sustainability truly meant in our farm setting was not anything that we really had an idea about. So when we first started, always being organic and being one of the first to certify organic, we first started buying kelp and blood meal and bone meal and investing amazing amounts of money in our fertilizers. And as we learned more about sustainability, we shifted everything and how we grew and managed our soil and our pests and everything on the farm, to where now we grow redworms and they make all our fertilizer for fertilizing in the greenhouse. And now we do cover cropping and then intensive green manures, which we never did in the beginning. So we started out spending a lot more than we were making back, and we've learned how to deal with that delicate balance of truly being sustainable in what we're doing. So lots of changes over the years, but we've added value-added products and seed production to what we do, and it shifts as we age. I mean, we do what we can do, and it's different year to year. So when we started out, I'd always say, well, we became farmers so we could only have to work half days. That's 12 hours a day. And we still do that, but we find time for a nap in the afternoon, and that makes a big difference.
Yeah. Diane, just as a side, you used to tell about in your marketing talks that you came up with new ideas, and you'd take them to the Sandpoint market, and then the next year everybody was copying you. So tell.
Well, that's a given. If you come up with a new idea, and if it's a good idea, other people. I mean, we were the first to do salad mix at our market. That only lasted for a couple of years, and then we went from being the only salad mix to 10 vendors with salad mix. But when we first started at our farmers market, there were 10 vendors, and then as time has gone by, now we have 60. So through the Cultivating Success program and over time with my students, I'd say half the farmers at the Sandpoint Farmers Market now are students that have gone through the Cultivating Success program or the Sustainable Ag program. So I've taught some really good marketing techniques that have brought competition for me, but that also makes me reassess what I'm doing and reevaluate and keep changing. I mean, that's for the survival of any small acreage farmer, that's really what it's about. You can't go and say you're going to do one thing and stay with that. We call that the good old rock syndrome from Bart Simpson is always good old rock, no matter what. When they do rock, scissors, paper, he always does the rock. He always loses, so we don't do that.
Thank you. Yeah, let's let Ellen. Ellen, you're in the Coeur d'Alene area. Can you kind of give us a picture of what has changed in that area, in the market, whatever?
Well, I think it'd be repeating a lot of what's already been heard, but the market for local produce has just exploded over time. I remember in the early days of the market, and actually the market started in 1986, so that kind of dates how long I've been at it. But, you know, we were lucky if a dozen people came through the market. There were just a handful of vendors, and they weren't always the same vendors every week, from week to week. And if we went home with $25, we thought we'd done well. Obviously, that wasn't a sustainable living, but we stuck with it. The market struggled for a number of years, but then the local food craze hit, I guess, or more and more people got on board with that, and it's been amazing. The demand for local produce, we as a small farm can't provide. I mean, we're always getting asked to join more markets, to supply more restaurants, to provide more wholesale, and we choose to stay as a small farm. So the demand is just exploded. The interest that people have, the support that the community has for their local farmers. I mean, I think in the early days there were very few people that really cared that much. I mean, they were at the market, a lot of them because they thought that's where they could get the cheap produce coming right off the farm. But I know now that I think the majority, it's safe to say, of the customers value the quality and the freshness and just the fact that it is local. So I think that's been a huge change in the local food system, and just all the support and networking and organizations that support local agriculture has been a huge change.
That's great. Could I ask you another question while you got the mic right there? What do you consider the most significant contribution to your success over the years?
Well, consistency. This is kind of an odd thing to say. I have not missed a Saturday market since 1986. But that's a little extreme. But it gives you an idea of the dedication to being there, and especially in the early days when the market was. I mean, there's such a delicate balance in a beginning market, and I've seen a lot of markets start and fail over the years. having the vendors there with the produce, having the customers there, and you have to have both. And if you have vendors that are only there some of the time, which, I mean, it's hard to make a commitment to be there every time, to have the produce, to be there to take the time. But I think that contributed to the success of our farm, that we were just, no matter what the weather, what the conditions, we always had something for the customer that would show up there. We had a little, not just one thing, but a bit of an offering that they could go home with the produce. And I think in the beginning that really helped establish the Kootenai County Farmers Market and establish us as our reputation as a farm and the quality of the produce. And also I think that because it is a direct-to-consumer outlet, our connection with people. I mean, we've got customers, and I think other people that have sold at markets are probably experience the same thing. We have families that are coming who the parents came when they were children, and now they're bringing their children. So we have 3 generations coming to the market, know who we are. They've been getting food from our farm for that long, and the word spreads. You know, you just there's rarely a day that we come home with much from the market at all, and we're sold out of things early on, just because we've stuck with it that long and been there in the beginning stages.
So consistency and quality, I heard.
Yep.
Would you hand it down to Diane? Anything to add to that? I know you are consistent and do quality as well.
I just officially retired from the farmer's market after 28 years. I'm just from the farmer's market. I'm still doing CSAs, wholesale restaurants, and on Farmstead and teaching workshops. I'm just not doing that. I think it's important that I acknowledge that none of what we do on the farm could happen without a partnership, and the fact that I'm able to work with my husband and that we have a shared vision and shared goals, equal work ethic, and that we're able to at the end of every day have gratitude that we've been able to do something that we love. We're not getting rich with it, but we're rich in appreciation for right livelihood of being able to do something that we love. And I think that really feel gratitude that I have. We celebrate our 30th wedding anniversary this year, and all of that has been farming years. So we couldn't be successful without that team effort.
Yeah, thank you. How about we let Laura Lee answer a different question? Laura Lee, what's been your hardest challenge to remain a successful, viable farm?
Oh, the challenge is the beauty. I think the challenge is the fun part. You know, you're constantly challenged. You're challenged when you walk out the door and you don't know what you're going to face that day. And I don't know, there's always excitement on the farm. So I, along with Diane, I'm just grateful that I get to do it. I've been able to live the life that I live and have a great partner, like she said, and I don't know, fall in love with a piece of land.
So the message here is embrace the challenge. Right?
Yeah.
Anybody else have a challenge that they, something that they want to share with other people? What's hard? Come on. Ellen, I know you have a challenge. At least one, right?
Yeah, I'll mention a few. I think just finding the resource within myself, finding the time, the energy to address all the challenges that I want to take on, or all the projects, all the directions, all the ideas that I'd like to encompass, and the, I guess you'd say demands, but what I feel I would like to bring to the community, to my customers, but to the community, and also offer to people that are interested in learning about farming. It's just mustering the energy day after day and year after year is a challenge in itself, I think, and especially as the years accumulate on my body and on my brain, it becomes, I think, more of a challenge. So that's that's a big one, and I
Yeah,
think
you
it
guys
becomes-
work hard, so I got to imagine it's a challenge, and as we get older.
Yeah, and keep a good frame of mind
Yeah,
at it
definitely.
when you're.
I want to see what Maurice has to say on this question. Challenges.
Having enough hours in the day is probably one of the problems. And especially as I find myself getting older, I don't have quite as much energy to dedicate to misdirections that I did when I was younger. Let's see. Getting along with your family members can be a challenge sometimes. But then people problems are usually the biggest problems of any organization. It's not the resources, it's the people and the management of them. And then finding good help. I've been really fortunate the last few years to have people come to me and want to work on the ranch, and that's been really good. I've been really lucky. I would hate to think where things would be if I didn't have the high quality help. And I have several friends that are in businesses, and they're constantly complaining about trying to find good help. When you find it, it's worth its weight in gold, literally.
Yeah, that I can imagine that's a challenge.
Consequently, there's tremendous opportunities for young people, I think,
Yes.
to get into agriculture and make a killing. Yeah.
Okay. Anybody that want to comment on any of those questions so far? Challenges, contributions? Yeah, she's giving me the time thing, but this is so interesting, I can't stop. Okay, then I want to look to the future a little bit. And I think Maurice just addressed it, opportunities for current and future farmers. Maybe opportunities now that you didn't have. Anybody want to tackle that? What are those opportunities to make a killing?
I'll take a shot at it.
Okay.
Seeing as the mic is right here. There's no spring chickens on this panel. And that's the characteristic of agriculture across the nation. And more operators and owners are retiring out, and they need to be replaced. There's two ways to go on that. They can be replaced with, three ways: willing family members, unwilling family members, and corporate interests. Corporate interests are not going to manage the land for long-term return. They're going to only manage the land for immediate payback to shareholders. So we're seeing the results of this throughout agriculture today, with decreased soil fertility, increased herbicide and fertilizer costs, and it's not sustainable, much less regenerative. So that's the big challenge, I think, is what's facing us. Now, the opportunity there is those people need to be replaced with people with and younger people with a long-term planetary ethic that will take care of everything that we do to feed ourselves, and not just tomorrow, 1,000 years down the road.
Wow, that was great. Anybody else? Opportunities and challenges for the future farmers.
I think that there are so many opportunities out there now that we've stretched the idea of what a farm can be. When we talked about having a small farm and we have 36 acres, I mean, no, that's just really tiny. But people are making making a living or doing really good work on really small city lots, on rooftops and all those kinds of stuff. So I think like stretching the boundaries of what we call a farm even into the future and what markets might be like. I mean, Amazon came up in the marketing thing, and it's like, they're working on artisans and trying to get their stuff into their market. So maybe there's even some marketing opportunity that way. So I think we don't even know what the market might be. And then I think also we can go retro, and we can I think there's opportunities out there to just kind of do some really old-fashioned kinds of farming. I think, farming with horses and any kind of draft animal, I think there's lots of opportunities that way. So ways to recolonize farms all over, urban, suburban, and then hopefully more rural and agrarian-style farms that I'm in love with, the landscape and the values and the communities that evolve around those.
Great. Let's let Diane and Ellen have a couple of last words on this. I know we're running over, but we'll make up.
Well, I think just the opportunities with the resources that are available now that weren't available when we all started out is phenomenal. I mean, for young farmers, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You have access to farmers that have experience. You have access to the internet. We didn't even have the internet when we started. We had paper cups and strings when we started out. I mean, you have opportunities to use the resources that are out there and really do your homework and make a huge difference. So that's my main thing that I encourage is using those resources, doing your homework, and taking those opportunities, which we were kind of starting out figuring that out in the small farm world, because small farms were a very new concept when we all started doing this. And now here we are, honored citizen farmers.
Yeah, legendary.
I think not only the resources, the unlimited resources through the internet for the technology, for the implements that you might use, for access to the information, but also for the marketing. It just seems like even today I heard of another new twist on a marketing strategy from one of the participants in the workshop. I mean, there's no end to creative ways to market with the access to the internet. I think challenges, one thing that we really have to consider is the climate change. I think that's going to make a huge impact. Things aren't going to be able to continue as they are in a lot of cases. New farmers are going to have to be thinking about climate change as in their plan for how they're going to operate. Make allowance for that. I also think there's increased competition, but again, the opportunities for different strategies for marketing. And I also think most people have not grown up with the kind of work ethic that a commitment to farming often demands, and so I think it becomes more and more difficult. And as there are more and more farms needing help on farms, there's greater limitation to the workforce and people that are capable of doing the work and leading the lifestyle that's required. Maybe not required, but often goes hand in hand with a commitment to or a marriage to a piece of land to grow food on. So, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
I just want to say that's all the questions. Thank you so much. I could talk and listen to you guys for the next hour, but we had to really jam this conference into one day. So we do have to move on. Thank you so much. Let's give them a round of applause.